Spiros, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Pratik. Thanks for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
Let's start with the current state of play in AI for software engineering. So much is happening, and software engineering is being taken over by AI in all shapes and forms. So, just as a starting point, what are all the tasks within software engineering that can be automated with AI, and where are the gaps? Meaning, what is AI good at, and what is AI not good at as of today?
Yeah, so first of all, I think software engineering in the traditional sense before AI, does not exist anymore, right? Like it's not a question of if this is this happening, it has happened already. And, I think the future is our profession has changed and, most of the things we do will be driven by AI. I don't think that we're going to have fewer people working in software. In fact, I believe what's going to happen is going to have much higher technology output, like 10x, 100x, and more people are probably going to be working on technology and software. It's just that I think the way we work on it is going to change. I think we're going to be delegating more and more of the work to agents, and we're going to be operating at a level of abstraction higher. Now, if you take software engineering and what was done so far, I think at scale especially, what you see happening is that as systems become more complex, as you start delivering business through software, obviously reliability and how well the system runs and how stable it is become like of paramount importance. And generally speaking, more and more of the engineering time, whether that's software engineers or SREs, is spent in maintaining and improving these systems, not just like building new, right? And one of my favorite quotes from one of our recent engineers is that if I were to type all the code I create in a week, it's going to take me an hour. And why is that? It's because the complexity at scale makes it so that you have to worry about so many other things outside of like just coding that slows you down. And I do think that models have done an amazing job with coding, and obviously take Resolve itself, like the majority of our code is generated. And although this has created huge productivity gains, the velocity of actually or the output has not increased at the same pace, right? And why is that? It's because like basically that is only a fraction of what a software engineer does, right? You have to deploy and maintain and scale and improve all of that in production, right? And I think that's kind of the next frontier. That's what we need to now address to be able to move, like say 10x at the 10x the velocity of the prior kind of world.
Within software engineering, you mentioned reliability, and software reliability engineering is a big field. So, for people who may not know, what does that phrase mean, and also what is covered in the scope of reliability?
First of all, I think obviously we have within software engineering, we have software engineers, developers, we have maybe platform engineers, infrastructure engineers, we have site reliability engineers, and it obviously there is some specialization, right? But in reality, I think everybody is actually involved in all of the above, practically speaking, right? And obviously, in smaller organizations and smaller teams, oftentimes you don't even have specialization, right? The same people that build the application, manage the infrastructure, and troubleshoot the incidents, or try to make the whole system more reliable. Now, to your point about site reliability or reliability, to me that involves, in some sense, thinking and being proactive about all the things that might go wrong almost, right? And having like better design and having like more a more defensive posture in how you think, let's say, how the system runs in production, right? And how you deliver this software. And also it's actually being much more effective in actually understanding when something goes wrong, right? And when something goes wrong, being much better at connecting the dots and fixing the problem very quickly. So it's not really a separate discipline in my opinion, but it's part of like what makes great products great almost, right? Because they deliver a great user experience.
You're the founder of Resolve. For people who may not know, how do you explain what the company does in plain English?
So Resolve AI is building agents for software engineers and site reliability engineers, let's say, right? Broadly speaking, agents for software. So what we do is we build the agents that basically use all the tools that are available to humans whether that's source code, telemetry tools, infrastructure. So basically everything from code to backend databases and everything in between, right? Our agents try to deeply understand the structure and topology of software systems, learn all the tribal knowledge that might exist in environments, and then they can work alongside humans to help with reliability, right? The main use case of our product is what we call AI SRE these days, is to actually agents that are on call, they can receive alerts, they can participate in incident investigations, and hopefully get you to the root cause much, much faster than when a human does it. But also, because those agents essentially have like access to all these tools that a human has, our users use them for all sorts of other tasks, right? We actually use the term vibe debugging to describe this, but imagine any question that you have that goes across code and production, right? Something slowed down. Has there been a feature flag? Has there been a change? If there was one, could it explain the slowdown, right? Or is something else? So what we've seen is that it starts with, reducing like time to resolve incidents, reducing, let's say, escalations, making the life of on-call engineers better, but then it kind of expands to really most of the tasks that software engineers do on a daily basis by using all these tools.
Actually, that's a good segue into my next question about the product. So, Resolve, you're building agents who can autonomously step in, troubleshoot, fix issues. So, can you walk us through a simple, like a real world incident where the agent steps in and does its thing?
Yes. So first of all, the agent is not, think of it almost acts as a human, right? It uses human tools and it operates on top of all the tools that are available, right? You don't have to change anything. So basically it joins almost as another team member into your organization. Like, let's say a typical example is maybe an alert fires about something that is wrong, or a customer comes in and complains about some symptoms, right? The agent receives this very high level symptom. It could be that, suddenly some of our users are receiving, let's say, errors when they try to perform an action. And then what it does is it takes that high level symptom and then creates a plan and, goes and uses all the tools, right? It's going to go look into logs. It's going to go look into metrics and dashboards. It's going to go look at changes in infrastructure, changes in, traffic patterns, right? And, it goes into this loop trying to essentially figure out what might be causing the problem, right? As it does the work, reports back to humans. And this happens very quickly, right? What are the findings? So let's say within a minute from starting an investigation, it usually has an answer about what might explain the problem. But then it continues running in the background and it can interact with humans until it gives you an answer, essentially the root cause of the problem. And then after that, usually it can recommend a fix as well, right? In most environments, users want to be the ones who apply the fix. They don't want the agent to necessarily take action. But, the agent can also propose what the fix might be.
And as you go to the early days of company building, can you talk us through how you got your first few customers, and also looking back, like what were the learnings, like what went right, and if you had to do it again, what would you do differently?
I've done it multiple times. This is my
right.
fourth time
Yeah.
founder, so I had a lot of learning. I built two observability tools, log analysis tool out of my PhD that was acquired by VMware in 2012. It's called Log Insight. It's still, VMware's log analytics platform. And then in 2018, built a company called Omnition, which was an observability platform for cloud native apps. We also co-created OpenTelemetry, which now has become a very popular open source project for, essentially collecting. It's a de facto standard for collecting telemetry from software systems. It's the second most active project in CNCF after Kubernetes. CNCF is the foundation that shepherds Kubernetes. So I guess I have like a few views. I mean, some things changed actually in AI, but I truly believe that, the best way to build like a very useful product is to work with customers from day one. So at the beginning, we had this hypothesis that, building AI that kind of works alongside humans or does all this tedious and stressful work that humans have, it's going to be very valuable, right? Because it both helps with reliability of systems, but also, takes away all this stressful work, right? But we had two questions still, right? Is this something that humans would trust in production? I'm talking now early 2024, right? And is it possible to even build a system like this that is effective enough that is going to be actually useful and not create a bunch of noise? And to tell you, it's the hardest product I ever tried to build. And I think the only reason where we are with good success and traction so far is because we've been working with customers from day one, right? And there are no silver bullets, especially not in AI. As easy as it is, let's say, to build a demo application, it's that much harder to build something that works in production. So a few of the principles on which we build the product, right? True innovation comes from solving real customer pains, and we've been trying to do this from day one. We're working with design partners from day one before we even had a product. We started by discussing ideas and mockups. And then, I truly believe, and this is kind of a lesson I had from all the startups I worked on, like if you want to build a great company and a great product, the only way to do it is by working with great people. And if you ask me where I spend most of my time other than product and customers, was actually trying to recruit and convince smart people to join our mission. So these are some of the lessons that we applied from the early days.
That's amazing. And talking about open telemetry, you created it, and it is one of the hugely popular tool, and it's certainly the industry standard when it comes to observability. So can you talk about the open source journey, and also more importantly, how it influences your thinking around product, bottom up adoption? And maybe part B to the question is, if somebody has an early open source tool that's kind of taking shape, how should they think about open source and community? So you helped create OpenTelemetry, which is a hugely popular open source tool, and it's certainly the industry standard when it comes to observability. So can you talk about how the open source journey influences your thinking around product? And also, maybe part B is, if somebody has an open source tool, it's kind of slowly, early days, taking shape, how should they think about community, trust, bottom up adoption, and hopefully commercializing it sometime in the future?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm a huge believer in open source. It has been a huge kind of positive influence, like in an industry, right? Like technology has become a lot better because we adopted open source widely, right? Like from Linux to OpenTelemetry and everything in between. With OpenTelemetry, back in 2018, we started by working on OpenCensus, which is the precursor to OpenTelemetry. And then, OpenTelemetry was the outcome of the merger of OpenCensus and tracing. Our view at the time was that, first of all, every vendor had their own proprietary agent and format, which actually was bad for the end users, right? Because they didn't control the data. But also, it made our ability to utilize this data, it prevented, let's say, prevented us from utilizing the data fully, right? Because your metrics were separate from your logs, separate from your application, sometimes data. So our thesis at the time was that it doesn't make sense to have like the separation of data. It doesn't make sense to use proprietary protocols for all of these. And now, to be honest, we didn't know that, telemetry would become as successful as it became. But, it makes sense, right? Because it solves a very real problem. And, it gives us the ability to build much more powerful solutions. And if you think about why is OpenTelemetry so successful, and why is open source successful, right? Because when you have a movement like this, right, when you're trying to create a standard in some sense, right, it's impossible for any individual vendor on their own to actually do everything that the community does, right? When OpenTelemetry started, we had 10 developers working on it, right, across all the contributors. The bigger vendors who had their own agents had hundreds already. But, still, when the community comes together and when you build a movement, right, OpenTelemetry ended up having more than 1,000 active developers. And it's impossible for any kind of individual, let's say, kind of company to be able to accomplish this, right? And I think, honestly, moved the industry forward and made observability what it is today. And the other thing I'm proud about when it comes to OpenTelemetry is it's not just a product, right? It's kind of like or an open source project. It's a framework, right? And many successful companies actually were built on top of it. So to your question about commercialization, I think that I'm not a huge fan of like open source projects for just the sake of maybe distribution, right? I think that they truly have to provide something that is valuable. And if you're going to build a business, I mean, it's desirable, right? If there is one. I think I do believe that the best way to do it is in a way that complements the value that the open source provides, right? Take OpenTelemetry as an example. You know, what we did and what I would suggest anyone do if they want to work on it, like, don't try to take that and maybe like create a closed source version or like a limited version of that, right? But maybe build now a much more powerful, observability solution, assuming that OpenTelemetry is successful, right? And anyway, that's kind of my philosophy on it, and I think that makes it a lot easier because then we're not kind of going against the community, right? It's truly open source, and maybe the value that open source creates is complementary to what you're trying to build as a commercial solution, right? Rather than the open source being like a subset of what your commercial solution is.
When it comes to building a developer tooling company, or mostly selling to engineers, there are so many products and tools in the market. So how do you think about positioning a product in this domain? And also specifically, how did you do it when you started, when you talk to customers? How do you explain what you're trying to do and where you're positioned in the market?
I think that it depends on obviously it starts with solving a real problem, right? And doing it in a much better way than it was done before. The reason for us to start Resolve is, the motivation and also the way we thought about it is like that there is now not just like a slightly better way of solving this problem, but it's a completely different way of solving the problem, right? And, our entire focus has been on definitely building something that is way better, but also being different, right? Like by thinking from first principles, how maybe we should troubleshoot systems, right? How should we approach all these hard problems of connecting the dots across different, data systems? And I think if you do that, then you find yourself in a situation, maybe, you're not competing directly with kind of established products and vendors, right? Maybe you're solving initially a smaller problem, but you're doing it so much better that it becomes a no-brainer, right? As opposed to like trying to be maybe very broad and maybe try to be everything to everybody. So that's kind of my take and starting. And I started with something very painful problem and try to be very niche almost, right? Like solve it better than everyone, but focus on one thing, right? And you even see this, in my opinion, as a mistake sometimes, like AI kind of developer products do these days, right? They try to be too broad, right? And almost, they're good at some things, but you cannot be great at many things all at once, right? And I think then, you dilute the value.
And when you think about the philosophy of product building, what core tenets, or how do you structure your teams? What do you tell them? How do you think about just product building inside the company?
So, there are a few kind of principles we try to follow, right? One is we don't believe, let's say, in technology or innovation, let's say, for the sake of it, right? We always try to essentially have a lot of clarity on what is the pain that we're trying to build, right? And not only that, we always try to have a lot of clarity on what of the problems that we're trying to solve have a known solution, and it's, let's say, mostly engineering, and what of the problems actually require maybe research, right? It's require a new approach. And honestly, the only way to separate between the two and not do research for the sake of research is by deeply understanding both the problem and the technology available to you at any given moment to solve the problem. And this is kind of my philosophy in product building, right? And obviously, to do that well, you need to be honest with yourself first of all, right? Is the problem you're solving real, right? Do people have the real pain? They're going to pay money for it, right? And then also it requires you to work very, very closely with users and always validate your ideas. And then in the early days, I do believe that the best way to do it is for everybody to have access to everything, including like customers, for engineers to be, let's see, the product managers, especially when you're building dev tools, and interact directly with users and customers and build the product at the same time. Until very recently, until we had like more than 30 engineers, everybody reported directly to my co-founder, who's the CTO of the company, and everybody had access to all the information. And it was much better way of actually communicating and understanding the problem.
Now, going into company building for a second, you've done this multiple times successfully. So, if you look at the cultural norms and principles that you want to continue keeping from your previous companies, so what would that be? And also, more maybe part B to the question is, what is something that you specifically don't want to do at this company that you did previously, which you now think is either not great or just not optimal for some reason?
Yeah. So first of all, I think being a founder, it's not like a glamorous job, and I think maybe it appears like that to people right now. But if you approach it that way, I think you're going to be very disappointed. Being a founder means doing all the work that nobody else sometimes wants to do, right? And not just doing it for the sake of doing it, but doing it because you need to set the example that to do this well or to be successful, like to be able to do whatever it takes. I believe in transparency, actually radical transparency, I would say. Like inside the company, everybody knows everything about what's going on. Every quarter when we have a board meeting, we actually share the deck with everybody. I truly believe that any problem should be visible to everybody. Sometimes founders make the mistake of hiding, let's say, challenges because they want to protect their team, right? They feel like, oh, if people are exposed to all these problems, they might get scared. I think the opposite is true, right? I think if you want to have an amazing team, right, and if you want to solve hard problems, everybody should be fully aware of what's going on at any given moment, because chances are somebody else is going to be more creative than you in coming up with a solution, whatever the problem might be. And also, I think it creates a culture of trust and a culture where startups have problems all the time, right? Like most things don't work. So this approach, in my opinion, creates a culture where people don't get scared, right? Like when something goes wrong, they come together to solve the problem, right? They don't run away because this is so sudden or, a surprise to everybody. Now, one of the things that I'm doing differently is in most of my previous companies were like in person, but we always had, from the beginning, folks that were remote, right? Because, you always know great people that maybe don't live in the Bay Area, right? In our case. This time, we decided that we would all be in person, work in the office 5 days a week, and do it all in San Francisco. And I truly think it was a great decision, in that obviously makes maybe recruiting a little bit more difficult, but at the same time, maybe it attracts people who want to be in an environment like this, right? And I think this environment creates trust a lot faster, enables you to solve hard problems a lot better because the communication is better, and in general creates, I would say, a very strong culture. And oftentimes people feel much closer to each other, and they work hard because they want to support the people they're working with, and they want to actually do great and solve real problems and hard problems.
You made a very good point about how founders feel the need to protect the team from all the bad news, the hard news, so they just kind of keep it contained. But on the flip side, let's say if you're completely transparent, every board deck gets shared, everything, cash out date, all of that gets shared. Now, on the flip side, some of the founders said, hey, I did that, and now in addition to the problem, I had to deal with all the team members who are freaking out because they're just not used to it. So how do you balance the need for complete transparency, which is great, but also teammates who are just not, maybe founder stress is not for everybody. So how do you deal with that dynamic?
Yeah, I think actually the problem you're describing is exactly what I'm saying avoids, right? First of all,
Right.
you need to, as a founder, first of all, you need to be honest with yourself, right? is the situation as good or as bad, let's say, as you might imagine.
Right.
Founders tend to be.
Right.
Second, what I'm saying is, like, if you build this culture from the beginning, people are not used to it, right? I agree with you. But let's say when you start doing it, when it's 5 people, right, and it's 10 people, like the 11th person that comes to the company, maybe surprised initially, but then they become part of the culture themselves, right? And I think you can maintain this a lot better as, let's say, new people join the team, and they realize that that's how we operate. In my opinion, it becomes very, very powerful, right? And what you're describing, in my opinion, is a symptom of maybe somebody not doing it, and suddenly when something is wrong,
Right.
actually now
Right.
exposing it to people.
Right. Actually, that's a very good point. And I think it's like, if you want to do it, you do it from day one, because if you start doing it, 2.5 years into the company, that's a big culture shock, because you've hired, recruited certain type of people based on your criteria then, but now suddenly you want to introduce this very like net new thing. Maybe question then, when you are looking to recruit your first 5 or first 10 team members, like, how do you test for this muscle? Meaning, obviously you can test the technical knowledge, you can do background checks, that's good, but how do you test for I don't know, mental toughness, or just the ability to withstand all the stress?
I think that naturally anybody who would be willing to join a 5 or 10 people startup, probably they have built-in resilience, right? Like I don't think, what I usually do is, when I talk to somebody, even at this stage of the company, right, we're 60 people, I always try to understand for myself, are they a person that's gonna enjoy working at a startup, right? Which means the fast-paced, the challenges, the intensity, or is this a person, somebody who feels like somebody that prefers stability, prefers to be in an environment that is predictability and all of that, right? Now, how you test for that, I don't know if I have a set of criteria, but usually it's very easy to tell, right? And it's very easy to tell because oftentimes people who prefer stability will care a lot more about, let's say, to discuss salary and outcomes than work, right? Which is fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But, you can tell very quickly. And then what I do is, when I find somebody who truly feels to me like a startup person, especially if they don't come from a startup, right? Especially if they come from maybe big tech, then I usually, like, that's where I focus, right? And I spend a lot of time, because I honestly believe it's going to be better for us, but also more importantly, better for them to join a startup, right? Because if you have that mindset, and if you want to move fast, and if you want to have ownership, then startups that work well are magical, in my opinion, right? Like, the satisfaction you get is way more than, let's say, a bigger organization where we're constrained, where oftentimes decisions are made for you, and etc. Right? Like, one way I describe this sometimes is, let's say if you go join one of the big labs, right, for people who work in AI, the work might be interesting, but your own kind of work won't make or break the company, right? Or the chances of that are very, very small, right? Versus if you join Resolve or a startup like Resolve, your own work can make or break the company, right? And if that excites you, you should be at a startup.
Right. Looking forward to AI and software engineering as a whole, right now, a couple of areas where for code generation, it's a lot of people have adopted the product. So code generation, AI is being used for code review, AI is being used for DevOps, incident management. So if you look forward to the future, what's the next area in software that's like ripe for disruption? Meaning, where will AI make the biggest impact? Is there what do you see happening in the next 12 months?
Yes. So what we have seen happening so far, in my opinion, is that models tend to be very good with almost like one modality of data, right? When it applies to software engineering, like, models have become very good with code, right? And they have become very good, in a similar sense, maybe with customer service data, which tends to be text. I think that software engineering is not just coding, but to solve real software engineering, you have to build models and agents, or the combination of the two, that is very good in dealing with all the different modalities of data, right? Source code, telemetry, which itself is usually time series versus unstructured data like logs. Understanding infrastructure and changes and all these events that happen there, and also all the tribal knowledge that usually exists that is very unique in every organization, right? Code is self-documenting, but the way my application works end to end actually has many things that are unique and particular to me, right? That go outside of code. So I think that as now models improve and we can build agents that can reason and can connect the dots, I would say like we're at the cusp of being able to solve all these maybe harder problems that all honestly are much more common in larger code bases and larger systems, right? So I think that where we are today is we have like obviously coding tools and coding agents that work quite well. I think we're starting to see AI SRE tools that also now try to connect the dots across all production systems. But also we start to see that code becomes an input, and maybe you have like a more broad view of the world now across code and production.
And for Resolve, and as you go forward, the company, how do you view yourself growing and expanding? Meaning, right now you're doing what you're doing, but in the next 12, 24, 36 months, like what's on the roadmap?
Like I said at the beginning, in my opinion, as a startup to be successful, you need to solve, smaller set of problems or even one problem and solve it really well, right? Our focus as a company is to be like kind of an amazing AI SRE, as I call it, which means like we want to be a tool that is indispensable that software engineers and SREs want to use for, let's say, troubleshooting problems, incidents, alerts in their environment, right? We want to, and we already see it happening with our customers, where the way they approach this problem has completely changed, right? It improves their quality of life, it improves the outcomes, and avoids so many other stressful situations that you find with on call. That's our primary goal, and we want to be like excellent at it, right? Now, if you're excellent at it, then many other possibilities open up, right? Because now, to do this well, you build a system, an AI system that understands like software end to end, right? Because it has to operate all these tools, it has to extract tribal knowledge and all of that, right? So naturally, if you have a system that understands, software so well, you can start expanding to other problems and other tasks that humans perform today, right? Whether that's the management of the underlying infrastructure, whether that's improvement in code for reliability purposes, whether it is actually managing the underlying tools, that's the human tools, right? The observability tools, for example, that humans use today. So my view is that if we do this very well, we earn the right to solve many other problems, right? But we have to prove at scale and with hundreds of customers that we're the best for the best AI SRE, let's say.
And I have one final question before we go to the rapid fire round. As of today, AI is moving so fast. What AI advancements are the most exciting to you?
I think that honestly, we're at single-digit percentages of the way to the end, in my opinion, when it comes to AI. I truly think that we're on an exponential curve. I think that models are ahead even of the capabilities of products who have built and agents, and we're just scratching the surface, right? I truly think that the more especially kind of the reasoning abilities of models evolve, even like a small increase in that like opens up many possibilities of additional things that we're able to do, right? And I truly believe that, why am I excited about AI, right? I think that oftentimes we worry like whether it's going to take our jobs, right? Maybe ourselves as software engineers, we're worried that, there is a future where there are fewer software engineers. Like I said, I don't believe that's the case, but that's not really the main question in my mind, right? Like the main question is like, are we going to be able to build technology a lot faster, right? And are we going to be able to use that ability to solve really hard problems? So to me, it's very, very desirable, let's say, for AI to evolve and to evolve quickly and remain in this exponential improvement path, because I think it's going to enable humanity, honestly, to solve harder problems, and it's going to make things that are maybe inaccessible to many parts of the world way more accessible, right? And it's going to improve our lives, and it's going to improve the quality of lives of most people, right? Despite the challenges we're going to face along the way, right? Which are real and we have to be thoughtful about.
Amazing. With that, we're at the rapid fire round. I'll ask a series of questions and would love to hear your answers in 15 seconds or less. You ready? All right. Question number 1. What's your favorite book?
I guess in the context of startups, maybe is I'll give you two: Zero to One and Build.
Perfect. Which historical figure do you admire the most and why?
Probably, I'll give you a philosopher. I'll give you Epictetus, the Greek ancient philosopher, because I do believe in like stoicism. I believe like in actually discipline more than motivational.
All right, next question. What has been an important but overlooked AI trend in the last 12 months?
I'll give you actually a trend that I see myself now in when we build Resolve. That I don't know if many people understand. In my opinion, as let's say the models improve, the bottleneck of progress moves from actually, let's say, inference and reasoning to the underlying tools that are available, right? Because agents today have to work with human tools, and human tools, are usually slow. They actually don't support the throughput or the kind of the velocity in which agents can move. And I think there is a huge opportunity, not just to build, let's say, AI first solutions, but actually to go and build the infrastructure and the tools that agents will be using to replace the human tools that have been used so far, especially in the data space, right? Where a lot of the tools we have were designed for high throughput, data ingestion, but very, low, let's say, throughput of querying and data extraction. Please.
What's the one thing about AI in software engineering that most people don't get?
I think that because a lot of the first generation AI tools and agents for software engineers were built primarily by researchers, I think all of us are coders, right? All of us have built software. But I think I do believe that real software engineering is not just coding, right? That's a big part of it, right? But it's also running and maintaining and improving and making all these systems reliable, right? And I truly think that there is a lot more value and there is a lot more challenges, a lot more challenges on that part of software than on the part of coding and coding agents.
What separates great AI products from the merely good ones?
Like I said, building a demo with models is very easy. Building a truly production-ready product is much harder than before. And I think that what you see happening is that oftentimes, we solve like simple problems that are solvable today, but maybe with AI, we'll make them a little bit faster. What is truly actually game-changing is when you can build something that solves a problem that was not possible before, right? And that's where greatness comes in my mind when it comes to AI products.
What have you changed your mind on recently?
I've changed my mind on many things. I think okay, maybe I'll choose one, right? Like which I shared earlier. I truly think that we completely underestimate how far AI is going to take us over the next 12 months, right? Things that we thought might take 5 years to get to, I think they're like 12 months away, right? Like the way we work, even as software engineers, right, is going to look completely different in a year from now. I don't think, people talked about the death of the ID and all of that. I think we're going to go way beyond that, right? We're going to be having agents that are doing way more work than just answering a simple question or performing a simple task, right? Many, many steps. And, again, that I think is going to accelerate our ability to develop, to build technology a lot faster.
All right, final question. What's your number one advice to founders who are starting out today?
I think that to be successful as a founder, first of all, you have to have huge persistence. You have to be obsessed with a problem you want to solve. You have to have conviction to believe that what you're building is going to work way before anyone else. And you have to be actually truly be willing and ready to work for the next 5 to 10 years on a problem, right? Unless all of these are true, I don't know if, somebody should try to become a founder. But of course, then there's many other advice on how you build products and companies. But I think these are almost personality traits that somebody has to have.
Amazing. Spiros, this has been a brilliant discussion. obviously you're a company builder. I've done it multiple times. So loved your insights and loved the depth of the level of thinking you need to do to keep going and build a big company. So thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing your insights.
Thanks a lot, Pratik.